still dancing to our new jazzy theme tune. I can't get used to it. It's proper good. Good evening and welcome to The Caring View, the only online weekly social care chat show, bringing a platform to everybody in the sector. Before we get started, just to remind everyone that the views expressed in tonight's show, especially of us hosts, is of our own and not our respective companies. Please don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you've got any questions, anything that you want to bring up, or any experiences you want to share, just pop them into the comments and we'll be able to discuss them as we go along. It's just the two of us tonight. Unfortunately, Dawn is unwell. As Mark was saying before the show, she has just got a new puppy. So we are convinced she's at home playing fetch and just squishing and cuddling it as much as possible. And it is absolutely beautiful. I thought we were going to get a sneak peek of it tonight, but unfortunately not. So good evening, Mark. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. You?
I'm good. Still tired. Social care, still social care. I've not had much chance to be overly involved in any of the news this last week. So have I missed anything? What's new? What do we need to talk about?
I think this week there's been a lot of talk and a lot of articles shared about the vaccine in care homes. I think there's been a lot of articles written and a lot of staff that are leaving the sector saying that they're moving into the NHS, which is obviously then sparking conversation about actually what's going to happen to the NHS, whether they will mandate it there or whether they won't mandate it. And I think the NHS are looking very closely on care homes at the moment to see the impact that it's having.
Yeah, and, don't get me wrong, I understand that we want people to stay in at least some part of the sector, whether it's health, whether it's social care. We want to keep those caring people here. But the idea of this last sort of 3 years is social care has been there to prevent, unnecessary burdens on healthcare. And just the reduction of staff in care homes is only going to increase the amount of people that are going to be stuck in hospitals because we're bed blocking. People won't be able to get discharged because there won't be that many care homes for them to go to because they're just not going to be able to survive and to operate. I think last week we discussed the letter that Jane Brightman from the IHSCM, frequent guest on our show, had written and managed to make the front page of the Telegraph, the whole survey and campaign. And it's sort of been everywhere this last week, which I think is absolutely fantastic. If you're watching Helen Waitley, Sajid Javid, we've still not had a response from you yet. So I'm sure Jane's eager to have a conversation. And, we're not going to be antagonistic. We're not argumentative. We just want to be able to have this discussion, social care to our overseers, if you will. This is what's not working. Let's fix it together. Listen to us. We know what's going on. We are on the ground floor. We are seeing it firsthand. We are working 7 days a week and not getting any sleep and absolutely exhausted, and workloads are increasing. So just have a chat with us. And, I'm sure together we can work through this. If we want to talk about integrated care and working partnerships, offers there on the table. So I don't see why not. I think the other thing we need to mention today, which is rather exciting, is Mark, you've got a new job.
I have, yes, I have. Do you know what? It's so good to be able to say, yeah, I handed my notice in a month ago. Started today as a regional business manager for Essex Care. So I'm really excited about it. So I think, the pandemic, for all the negatives, and I did a post on social media, really hit home about the importance of spending time with the family. And, everybody watching, you obviously know I spent so long away from the kids and my wife. And I think actually my previous role gave me that family time back, but it didn't share the same values that I had about social care. And I think as well as having that work-life balance that I would never take on a job that didn't give me that work-life balance. It's really put it into perspective. But I wanted a job that had the same values as I had about delivering good quality care. And it wasn't just about, we're all businesses, but just, the ethos of the actual care service. So, I started today. So a very full on day, but it was good. So, caught the bus in the first time for God knows how many years. So, the park and ride, but it's still a bus. But I don't think I've caught a bus since I was at secondary school. So, it was surprised I made it back here on time, to be honest. Surprised I'm not in the middle of nowhere.
I must apologise. I did hear that, but I've got a helicopter flying overhead. We're down by the ocean here, so there's always a lifeguard helicopter flying above. But no, it's really interesting that you should say, one of the reasons why you've been happy to move, and it is that work-life balance. And the pandemic has taught you that being away from your family has been a really tough time for you. And I think it leads perfectly into the discussion tonight. Tonight we're going to be discussing ageing without children, and I'm heavily invested in this. I don't have children myself. I'm in a same-sex relationship. We're not going to have children. We like nice things. We like cruises when there's not a worldwide pandemic going on. And I like furniture that can break but won't break because there's no children running around the home. And I like my screen without fingerprints on. You know, it sounds awfully selfish, but we don't want to bring another life into this world. We just want to be able to provide our love to everyone that's already here. So, you know, we've got nieces and nephews and all of that. So we don't have children and won't have children. And we sometimes sit here, my partner and I, and go, who's going to look after us when we're older? And during the pandemic was a really difficult time for us because my sister had her family and they were able to form a bubble with my mother because child number one. So they got to continue their family relationship. Stephen, my partner's family, live miles away and we couldn't travel and you couldn't go and see, but they actually lived just across the border in Wales. So we were sat there most days on our own. No one to see, no family to interact with because we couldn't because of the pandemic. And very much like yourself, Mark, felt very, very lonely, living life through video cameras and what have you. And it was a really difficult time. And I think that was sort of a sobering moment for us moving forwards. This is potentially what's in store for us. So I think it was actually through discussions with Dawn, who sadly isn't here tonight, that we learnt of AWOC, wasn't it? Way back when we were planning shows originally. And we had no idea what AWOC stood for, you know, Aging Without Children. But really, really happy tonight to be joined by the founder, the chair of AWOC. We've got Kirsty and Paul joining us. And we've also got Trish joining us, who is obviously proudly living without children and is heavily invested in this as well. So we're just going to bring Kirsty, Paul and Trish in.
Evening.
Hello, hello.
Hiya.
Hi everyone, how are we?
Hello. I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Start. Raring to go.
Right.
Always. Like a coiled
So,
spring.
Kirsty, founder of AWOC, tell us what it's about.
Tell you what it's about. Well, I've worked pretty much all my working life with and for older people, which is now a lot more years than I care to remember, but it's nearly 30 years that I've been working on ageing issues. But it was something that I hadn't really related to my personal life because I'm unable to have children. So I'm infertile. I have unexplained infertility, and it wasn't something that I really thought about too much until I was actually having coffee with a friend of mine, and we knew each other through, we both worked at AWOC at that time, and she was having a good old vent about the care that her mother had been receiving, and it was a very familiar tale, one that we'd have all have heard many, many times, where her mother was in hospital after a fall. She had to go up there on a, like twice daily basis to make sure that she was, not because people were being actively horrible or neglectful, but just because people were so damn busy that it was quite easy for her, for food not to get eaten, for bells not to be answered, because there was always some other priority. So she was up there a lot. And then when it came to discharge, she was obviously then heavily involved in that and having lots of conversations with people about what her care package was going to look like. And then when she was discharged, the care package that was put in place wasn't really adequate. Some equipment hadn't been delivered. And when she phoned social services, they were like, yeah, we probably won't be able to deliver that for a week. But if you could come to the depot and pick it up, that would be great. So she was, and obviously all of this while doing a full-time job. And so she was all like having a good old vent. And at the end of it, she said to me, God knows what she'd do if I wasn't here. And it was like, boom. Light bulb moment, because I was like, yeah, what would she do? What would she do? What do people like her do? What will I do? And that kind of set me off, kind of talking to people that I knew in the age sector about, does it come up? All older people without children, does it come up at all? And pretty much everyone said no. And I thought, well, that's probably because there aren't that many of them. And then when I went and looked at the data, I was like, well, there must be a mistake, because there's over 1 million of them over the age of 65 and over 4 million people over the age of 50 simply don't have any children at all. And nowhere had this been picked up and kind of tracked through into what does this mean for care and support for older people. And I wrote a blog that was then picked up by The Guardian, and it kind of snowballed from there. and that was in 2014. And it's that was kind of like the burgeoning of it. That was the beginning of AWOC.
I mean, I was listening to your tale then. I was thinking, and my light bulb moment happened exactly when you said it, because I never even thought of it in that perspective. You know, and the amount of times we've heard in social care, and I'm sure Mark can agree. Oh, I don't know what they do if I wasn't here, and you know, oh, how do these people cope without children? And you think, oh yeah. But then when you sit and think about it, and you don't have children. Oh, actually, it's a bit of a home truth that I've got to start thinking about myself as well. So, Paul, how did you get involved with AWOC?
So my career started, I spent 10 years working in politics and campaigning before starting to work with, again, like Kirsty, within the AWOC network. And the first 10 years or so of that was actually working on the front line, running services and managing local AWOCs. And from that, I mean, we were, looking after, people through care homes, doing services like, toenail clipping, all of that sort of the mundane but really important stuff to people. And I met Kirsty, and we talked about various things. But what I was seeing through the service delivery was these people who were actually hitting crisis, they were hitting it because there wasn't that support around. And I think the one thing, and that was either because they didn't have children themselves, or because they were the children were living many, many miles away, or because they were estranged from them. So and it was interesting that Kirsty said, everyone said, oh, well, we don't see this, but actually there were some of us that were seeing it and thinking, well, the people who were racking up to the office saying, I haven't got any money, and the debt collectors knocking at the door, they were the ones that actually didn't have any support at all, family or otherwise. So for me, it was something I saw right at the ground, right at the coalface, as it were. And as I've sort of progressed through running local AWOCs and then working up into regional, and then I'm doing some national work. Again, I've seen this time and time again. So in 2020, I spent the year as director of the Silver Line, Esther Renson's charity that merged with AWOC, and I was asked to to go in and look after the staff and the board as part of that merger process. And as part of that, I went up to the call centre in Blackpool, the Silver Line call centre there, and meet the staff. Did all that, and that was fantastic to see what they were doing. But I listened in on some of the calls, and you were getting these calls that were coming in, and people were just saying, the call handlers were saying things, good evening, this is Mark, nice to speak to you. And these people were saying, I just want someone to talk to. I do not have anybody. And all they wanted was a voice on the other end of the phone. And as we teased this out, a lot of the people who were calling did not have any family support at all. And the stuff that you were talking about in your introduction about yourself just rings true. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. So as I've progressed through this, I mean, I've known Kirsty for, again, probably more years than either of us would really want to remember. But I think it's got to a point where actually to be able to do something with a charity like AWOC is actually very fulfilling. I'm aging without children myself. My partner is older than me. When we met, she wasn't able to have children, so we're as a couple, we're not going to have children. And I think it does come back to that question. Well, who's going to be there for me? Like you, I've got a niece. Hopefully, she'll smuggle alcohol into the care home when I'm in there. But do I rely on her, or what do I do? And that's an imposition to assume it. So for me personally, how is that going to work? So I think, working with AWOC now and actually asking these questions and getting some of the traction that we're getting with some of the local authorities that we're working with, we've made some steps forward here. So yeah, it's quite an exciting time.
Brilliant. And the stuff you just mentioned then, especially about your niece smuggling and alcohol for you, is something I want to try and touch upon later on in the show, is, the whole burdensome thing. Because when I've discussed with friends, or, even, God love them, my family, because they can't relate because they're not in the same situation as we are, as much as they try to empathize, they can't. You always get the whole, but you can adopt and have children. And then it becomes a point of, are we just having children to look after us? Are we just having children for the sake of it then? Are we using children to make sure that we're safeguarding our older years? And Should there not actually be a framework in place to be able to protect everybody, no matter whether they're, childless by choice? And I think Steve in the comments has said, childless or child-free. There's a difference between the two, but the similarities are very much the same. So it'd be great to, touch upon that later on. So Trish, do you want to let us tell us a bit about yourself as well? Because you're not employed by AWOC, are you yourself?
No, not at all. I come from a different background, employment-wise. I come from a sales background. I was mainly an estate agent, so it's marketing and PR and banging the drum with media if I can, which has not been that easy. But I got married. We were married early, and it was discovered eventually that we couldn't have children. It seemed to be a little bit like Kirsty's story. I wasn't very fertile, and it wasn't going to happen. And with regard to adoption, we tried to adopt. It didn't happen. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but it was true. We clearly didn't get on with the social worker. She didn't like us. We didn't like her. We got turned down. There was another route we took with adoption, but I won't go into that one. But we never spoke about it. We just never talked about it, because I'm 72, so this is a long time ago, and nobody spoke about it. Nobody at all. So it was just to accept it and get on with life. So we did. Whether we accepted it or we just shoved it to the back of our mind, I don't know. And life was okay. It was working hard. It was playing hard. Life was okay. And it wasn't until my mum became very ill, we split up, etc., etc. I met my other partner. He died some years back. When my mum became ill, and I'm running around looking after her, and stupidly, like I hadn't thought it before, I just thought, well, I'm looking after you. Who's going to look after me? I mean, she demanded it. There wasn't a lot of care for her. While I was doing it, nobody else was going to do it. There was no social care at all. And she was quite ill, actually, and ended up in hospital and died there. And that left me then, when my late partner died, that was me completely on my own. And still I sort of blundered on, not really realising the full implication of it until about 6 years or so ago, something like that. It started to really hit because friends were moving away. They were moving away to be near grandkids. So they were going, and there was no conversation left with them anyway. It was all about the grandkids. So suddenly I'm becoming slightly isolated. The friends are disappearing, and I'm sort of joining things, but I don't know why, it didn't work for me. And of course, it really hit last year, COVID. I'm sorry I have to mention that word, but it was. And it just highlighted things. And I had nobody. I went, because I had to shield as well. And I had nobody all year. I had nobody, just me and the dog. And I had to make the best of it, really. I had to do what I could. And this is going back to what Paul was saying. The first thing I did, I was so scared when it kicked off. Somebody said, I've got my delivery slots, right? So I got, a certain supermarket had guaranteed me priority pass at the supermarket. And they said, well, there's silver lining, isn't there? That's it. You're okay. You've got your supermarket pass. And I was so scared. I was really so scared. I was talking to the GP about just a repeat prescription. And I said, I don't know if you need to know this, but I'm having to shield. I've got no family. I've got nobody. I'm just completely on my own. I don't know what to do. Do you need to know about this? Does somebody need to know? And what they actually did was get Age UK Lindsay to phone me, which is the local branch of Age UK. And they were brilliant. They have been brilliant. But there's only so much they could do. It was a phone call, and I was very glad of it. I really was. And, but there's a limit to what they could do, really. And it's the middle of the night. If you're ill in the middle of the night, what do you do? And this is, this goes on. It doesn't end as COVID sort of starts to dissipate and we can start to gather. it still carries on. And there's been several instances when it became so scary. I just thought, I'm not going to sleep. I'm just going to lay awake all night because I don't go to sleep. It's that bad. And I think it was the end of last year. I just thought there must be something online that covers people like me. It can't just be me in the entire land, surely. And I came across Aging Without Children. I'm just so glad I did. And Kirsty, with a conversation with Kirsty, suggested that maybe I contact a group called TED Aging Better in our area in Lincolnshire, and we start a group around here, which we have started a group. We have started a group around East Lindsey, as this area is called. And it's strange because people are very reticent. They don't want to admit that they can't have children, or they don't have children, or for whatever reason, they're quite slow at coming forward. But bit by bit, they are gathering. The group is growing slowly, and that's all good. But I just want to get it out there. I just have this great need to let people know, listen to us, know about us. You need to know about us. And I think I'm getting this feeling that they are. And when you say to somebody, well, it's called Aging Without Children, and invariably the answer is, oh yeah, I never thought of that. I never thought of that. Why have they never thought of that? But there we are. It's a group that I think Lincolnshire is so big. I'm saying this now with Paul and Kirsty there. It could take another group, to be honest.
Yeah,
that's a first.
It's huge. Lincolnshire is massive.
It's massive. You can't cover it in one small area. But that's another conversation. But I think it could.
Yeah. Definitely.
But I think picking up something Trish has said there, I think the way Aging Without Children has sort of developed, Kirsty was the founder, and I think largely due to Kirsty's work, Aging Without Children is now accepted as a thing. Previously people didn't actually think it was actually an issue. It's now acknowledged as an issue, and the challenge for us as a charity now is to say, well, now you get it, what are you going to do about it? And I think that's our challenge. So I mean, we've sort of, Kirsty was phase one, if you like, and we're now in that sort of phase two of how do we actually do things with local authorities and with local groups about tackling the issues.
Yeah.
There's definitely a shift at the moment within social care about the remaining stigmas and taboos about care. So death, for one of them. Once upon a day, everyone was afraid to talk about death. I have nilophobia. I have a fear of nothingness. So at home, I don't talk about it at all. At work, talk about it all the time because we want people to have good deaths. But once upon a day, if you said, "Oh, I want someone to have a good death," you'd probably be frowned upon, going, "Why are you saying stuff like that?" Whereas now we're becoming more accepting about owning our life and owning our situations and accepting the inevitability and going, well, actually, this is inevitable now. We cannot change this. What do we do moving forwards? Because we can't accept it and do nothing about it. I mean, Mark, you are blessed with 3 beautiful children, 3 absolutely wonderful children. What does this sort of topic evoke for you? Because obviously, again, probably can't relate to something as similar as myself, but that's not saying that you can't relate to the situation. So what are your views on AWOC before we get into a full discussion?
Yeah, do you know what? I think as a charity, it's a brilliant organisation. And when I was listening to Kirsty, I was thinking back, years ago when I used to do assessments, whether that was for the care home or home care companies. And even back then, and even now, I think, if I did an assessment and somebody said they didn't have any relatives, you just automatically are like, do you have a neighbour that looks up? You just automatically assume, don't you, that there is somebody, and they're just, oh yeah, my neighbour at number whatever looks after me. And you just kind of put that down on the bit of paper in the care plan, and that's it. You don't really give it any more thought. But yeah, I think like Steve said in the comments, you can be childless, or can't remember what the comment was, but child free. And I have got 3, and I think before we went live, I did say you just don't know what's around the corner, do you? So it could impact me. The chances are hopefully very slim, but I think it's a great subject to raise awareness of. And I think, I said it beforehand, I think we do some of these, and, we know what the subject is. We all know about it, but I think this is going to be one of those nights where we're going to go away and we're going to have people contact us saying, you know, it's really opened their eyes to what, you know, aging without children really is, and hopefully spreading that message and just raising awareness. And I'm really looking forward to learning more. I think one thing, Trish, you were talking about is the group that you've set up where you live. What kind of thing do your group do?
Well, it was with TED Aging Better, which is a big charity that sort of funded by various partnerships. And what we do is we're still kind of a new group and we're finding our feet. So we meet online, of course, every fortnight, and we tend to have a speaker, and we've had very good speakers. But what I think perhaps now we've got a few more people, I think perhaps they'd like to just chat sometimes. Sometimes they want to just chat and tell their own tales and tell their own stories within the group and just have discussions. So maybe, you know, we won't have a speaker every time, but the other thing that was mentioned was, can we now meet in person? And, you know, people are getting desperate now to meet in person. I'm sure we can safely. I'm sure we can meet in person. What we have to do more of, and I make no secret of this, is we have to use media more. We have to, you know, we have to use press releases. In our group, I'm talking about, you know, we have to let people know, because one thing that came up was, and which come up several times, is we need more men. Like, and they're looking sort of in my direction and say, well, we need more men. You know, like, I'm going to go out on the street and just drag them in.
Drag in some unsuspecting men.
So I said, well, why don't on your TED site or in the media, why don't we sort of have a sort of gentle little group suggesting that men who are on their own join this, just come and join us and just have an informal chat and just see what we're about and see if they feel like joining in on the big group then, you know, and just sort of start. If they're a bit shy, that might be a way of you know, perhaps enticing one or two men in. It sounds awful, doesn't it? But we do. We didn't want. I don't think any group wants, you know, just all older women in it. You know, you want all of the different diverse groups represented if possible.
I think, though, one of the things is kind of picking up what Trish is saying about the media there, though. I think one of the key things for us, you will notice there was a lot of coverage about older people and ageing issues during the pandemic. What there wasn't any coverage of was any older people without family.
No.
There was basically, there was two types of coverage mainly about older people during the pandemic. One was people waving sadly through windows at grandchildren. So a lot of sad-faced waving going on. And the other one was older people talking to their grandchildren on Zoom or not being able to talk to their grandchildren on Zoom. And what was really interesting is we were completely unable to interest any journalists in the issue of people aging without children during the pandemic. And you would have thought journalists would have actually quite liked a different angle on older people, a different take on it.
I mean, it's really funny you should say that, because I did. And, you know, it's no secret, I did a tremendous amount of media from around November through till we're still doing it at the moment, because people have sort of latched on to social care now, and they're really, it's what, you know, brought this show to fruition is the media Mark, myself and Dawn were doing. And if I had known about AWOC back then, and I'd actually probably even processed it and thought about it back then, I would have mentioned it as a charity. But in a roundabout way, I try to bring it to people's attention, because the one thing we've seen throughout the pandemic is when visitors usually came, families, relatives, friends, whatever, they're all as important as they can be to somebody, whatever their relation is. They would come and they'd visit everybody in the home. They wouldn't just come and visit their specific loved one. So we had people who lived with us who didn't have like relatives or friends come and see them. But when someone else came, they'd bring them a magazine or a box of sweets, and they'd sit down and have a brew and a chat. And they got that visit, they got that interaction and that recognition and acknowledgement vicariously. And then when the pandemic hit, that all stopped for so many people living in care. So you try and mention it when you talk about it, but like you say, and you know, I advocate for John's campaign and rights residents, and there is that very real need for people to have that human connection. But people forget about those who have nobody, being cut off and isolated. You know, there's that very famous sort of saying, isn't it, where you can be surrounded by everybody in the world but still be lonely. And that's what it must have felt like in so many homes across the country for the elderly. And not just, you know, for the elderly. Mark is heavily invested in learning disabilities and has brought a very vested interest to the show about that. And we sit here and we talk about elderly people, but people who are living with quite severe learning disabilities and this is not to remove that option or choice of having children from them, probably are not physically or mentally able to have children, will one day be without their parents. And they themselves are aging without children. Even now, they're aging without children and don't have that support. And their parents go, and, you know, let's say they're 50 when their parents leave. 50 for us is nothing. That's when we're probably just about starting to think about it. So this is a topic that it impacts everybody, doesn't it? Absolutely everybody. Yeah. So what needs to change, Kirsty? What are you asking? What are you promoting? What's your mission at AWOC?
I said, well, I'll talk a bit about some of the practical stuff, and then Paul can talk more about the mission going forward. So I'll talk a bit about what we've done so far. So a lot of it for me, my focus is very much on the practical. So my focus is very much about, you know, there are lots of different routes to aging without children, because it includes not just people who don't have any children at all, but it includes, as Paul said, people who may be estranged from their children, people whose parents, people whose children may have predeceased them, people who may live many miles from them. So it's basically if you can't rely on family support for lots of different reasons. And so my view is always, you know, when push comes to shove and you've fallen over and you've broken your hip and you're in A&E on a Saturday night, what needs to change so that you will have as good an experience as someone will have with their children they're advocating and pushing for them. So a lot of it is about services reviewing their pathways and really being honest with themselves about how much they rely on family to grease the wheels between the systems. Because I think any of us who've kind of cared for a parent, supported a parent, know that you spend an awful lot of time going backwards and forwards between health and social care and other forms of government, filling in forms, making phone calls, you know, like repeating the same information to about 5 different people, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So it's about organisations reviewing their systems and say, if there isn't an adult child to step in at this point, what do we do? What do we do at that point? And one of the things that we have done is I was commissioned by the National Care Forum to write a toolkit on being AWOC confident, and which you can download from our website. And that's got loads and loads of really practical stuff in for organisations about how to make changes to processes and stuff. So that's a really practical thing. Also, we have a guide to setting up groups for people aging without children, but that's kind of what we've done up until now. But Paul is, as chair of the new charity, can talk more about what the plans are moving forward.
So thanks for that. So it's worth doing a little bit of background. So for the last 18 months to 2 years, Aging Without Children has actually been hosted by the Prama Foundation, who very kindly took it over when the community interest company had to fold. So they've flown the flag for us, and they still are very big supporters of ours. So, but when we were talking to them last year, and amongst ourselves, we decided we wanted our own vehicle because we felt that was the best way forward. If we wanted to raise money and do our own thing, we needed to be in control of that in governance terms. So with Prama's blessing, we replied to the Charity Commission, and we had our registration that came through, I think, about 6 weeks or so ago. Now, sorry, I had to smile slightly earlier on because you asked Trish if she was employed by AWOC. I mean, no. I mean, basically, we are all volunteers. So there's 3 trustees, and Kirsty is on our board as our advisor on the board. But given that capacity issue, we need to look at where we can make the best impact. So we are not banging the drum trying to get a new health and social care white paper. Firstly, because there are far bigger players in the field than us with bigger voices, and secondly, because frankly, we're all banging our heads against the wall about that anyway. So why would we do the same? So what we're sort of looking at is what we've got that we can work with and where we can actually get some traction and make some impact. And where we're looking to is at a local level, particularly around our local groups and the local organisations that are there. So Trish is from East Lindsey. We've got local groups in York and Leeds and Bradford. And all four of those groups have done really well, first of all, in getting themselves going. And they offer slightly different things. So the York group is very much a social group. The Leeds one, for example, is a bit more about information and information sharing and peer support there. So it's very much, what comes up from the members. That's what dictates really what the group does. But all four of them have actually managed to get into their local authorities and get their local authorities to sit up and go, aha, we get this. This is a thing. So our mission going forward, if you like, is to actually make sure we start more local groups, because not only does that support more people who are aging without children in those localities, but it also then influences local commissioning and decision makers. So I think there's a sort of twin track there about making sure people who are aging without children in areas across the country can meet with like-minded people and go on trips or go to the pub or get their information and advice. But then they can also be assured, if you like, that the local commissioners, the local health service, the local authorities do actually have a reasonably good idea about what their issues are and are hopefully commissioning services that actually meet them. It's not about commissioning services that are specific to those aging without children. It's more about commissioning the stuff that should be there anyway, but with a slant that acknowledges that some people may not have that family support. So that's where we are. That's what our plans going forward are going to be. We would, if we're looking at this time next year, I mean, we've got 4 groups at the moment. I'd like to get us up to at least 10 by this time next year. On the website as well, there's a guide that we've written to supporting people who want to start local AWOC groups. And we're more than happy to work with people on a national level. When things come along, we will take advantage of it. There was a company called Public Policy Projects who recently did a big report, and we were quite pleased. We managed to get a whole page in there that actually raised the issue of aging without children, which we took as a real win, because this was one that went into the Health and Social Care Select Committee and is up there in government. So we will take advantage of that. But I think for us, largely, it's the local groups and getting local commissioners, because that, in essence, local authority commissioners, local health service commissioners, they have an enormous amount of power and influence over the services that Mr. or Mrs. Smith, who is aging without children in whatever local authority, actually receives. So they're the people who we need to get hold of. And to be fair, with the 4 groups that we've got, the local authorities are really, they're onto it. They know they're not quite where we would like them, but at least that we've got an open door. And I think we will be pushing on that in the next year or so.
Paul, I know that we have some of the people listen on catch up, and they listen. They don't watch it; they just listen to the audio in their car. For anybody driving right now or just listening, what would be your advice around setting up a group? And obviously, they can go and have a look on your website. But for anybody just listening, what would be the top tips that you would have for setting up a group?
I think the first thing would be to contact us, and we could send them the that guide, that toolkit, because I think there's been an enormous amount of work that was done a number of years ago about how to do it, the mistakes to avoid. So I think the best thing would be to give them some sort of framework to use. The second thing would be to be in touch with us, because we would love to hear about them. And I think the one thing that I've started with the 4 groups we've got is we have a monthly catch up, which is fantastic, because we hear all about them. We hear the silly things that they're doing. We hear that the York group are now trying to do hybrid meetings with some people actually in person, and then some not. And that's I think there was teething troubles with the first one, but now it seems to be working, and that's fine. But I think without that sort of connection to other groups and to us at the national level, a startup group might feel a little lost and lonely, and well, what the hell are we doing? So I mean, and we would want to give them that support to get them going. So I think those 2 things would be get hold of the guide, and be in touch with us.
Thank you very much. And what about if there's somebody listening like myself that's got children, but actually they want to get involved and support? Are they able to get involved, or do they need to be living without children? Or
I don't think we're going to be that prescriptive for this. The reason that Kirsty says there are so many different ways that people can be with aging without children. But I mean, if there is someone who, like yourself, who wants to support us and shout and help us and shout about the cause, then we're not going to say no, are we?
no.
I think also, and not to be, and this sounds awful, and I really don't mean it to be like this, but we never know what is around the corner. I know that sounds terrible, but we never know what is around the corner. So I think as society is evolving now, we all become, we have allies of the LGBTQ plus community. They don't identify as part of that community, but they're allies to us who want to support our cause. And I think if you're heavily invested in making sure society works smoothly and you want to be there for everyone, then I think we should accept help from absolutely everybody.
Absolutely.
And if anyone wants to get involved, I mean, I smell an ambassador situation going on here. I can imagine AWOC ambassadors around the country. I mean, if Skills for Care can get over £30 million worth of funding from the government, I can't see why AWOC can't grow and advance, because it's something that is so real to so many people. So I think those tips, Paul, are absolutely fantastic. And if anyone is listening, we're in the world of virtual now. So shove it up on your local Facebook groups and start getting your interest. Do a pop-in. Say, it's a pop-in on a Tuesday night. Join us between 8 and 9. And you can build your numbers up that way, can't you? It's easily. If I had the time, I'd be doing something up in Lancashire, in Blackpool, because they should be everywhere, and there are so many people who need them. But what solutions can we think of? We can't just adopt children. We can't just go, well, it's fine. Let's just have a child and that'll solve our problems. I don't think we can be like Japan, where they have a rent-a-family scheme, because that's a huge business in Japan, where you can rent grandparents or grandchildren or anybody to spend time with. I'm not entirely sure that culturally that's something that we would adopt in this country. So what are the solutions? Obviously, care providers have a huge part to play with advanced care planning, but what can we be doing now? What can I be doing at my age now to actually safeguard my future, thinking about it? Because it can't all just be about people who are currently in this situation. There has to be something we can do to prepare ourselves for future life. So, Trish, anyone, what would you say to people now thinking, plan for the future, this is what you can do?
Well, I mean, individually to plan, it's the obvious things, like your legal, your will, your power of attorney, most important, because it didn't really hit me, as I say, I'm on my own now what am I going to do? Till I was much older, and I should have been preparing to a lot younger age. And that's something that I think AWOC could probably put out there as a message.
Yeah.
Wittingly or unwittingly, because the name is getting out there, people are listening and starting to take it on board, like yourself, Adam, like you're saying. So there's the legal side of things. There's the things like your dog, your pets. What do you do with them? There's that, and you've got to prepare. And then what about you? And it's me. It's me in the middle of the night. What do I do? And I'm ill in the middle of the night. What do I do? Because it's like, say, phone the ambulance or something. It's not that simple, I don't think. It's not that simple. I'm not sure that is fully the right answer, because sometimes it's just a certain worry, just a fear. I did come up with a cunning plan, actually.
All right. A cunning plan.
I bet Paul and Kirsty will say, oh, no, we've thought of that one. No. Well, only because I read that in Scandinavian countries, and as soon as I say this, somebody will know where I'm going, but still, they build these little houses, and how we have sheltered housing and that sort of thing. But it's something like that, but not quite that. And it's purely for AWOC communities to look after each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just to look after each other. So I can't name the name of the big builder that does that sort of thing, I'm guessing. So, I'm just imagining something like that. It would have to be apartments, I guess, because there'd be more of them. And
if you know the name away, we're not the BBC.
I was going to say,
Go on, say it.
Partly Stone. And they build very nice apartments for retirement apartments, for anybody really over a certain age, if they want to go and buy one of, or rent or part rent one of these very nice apartments, and you pay big management fees and it's quite expensive, but it can work for somebody who, even with children, they will, perhaps want to have one of these apartments. Well, not for people with children, for people who haven't got anybody, for people who are aging without children. And they are responsible for their own community. So it doesn't have to have a manager. It's like having flats and you have a management committee, don't you? Because it's not free
co-housing.
In a way.
Co-housing.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's called co-housing, and there are some examples already in the UK, and there's been sort of like work to try, because because you're right, in Europe they've got, well, in Germany I think they have like 900 of them, whereas in the UK I think we have 15. So there's obviously a big drive for that. So yeah, I think co-housing is a really good solution.
I'm thinking about the people that could be in these houses, are the people that could, the most things could be going into care homes, for their own safety, because we've got nowhere to go. Nobody's looking after me. What am I going to do? I go into a care home. This may be a way of preventing perhaps that, that. Yeah, go on, Kirsty, you were going to say.
I was just going to say, I think though for me there's a kind of like a slightly more, I think there's a lot about actually talking about it, and I know that sounds a bit kind of like perhaps a bit woolly, but I think one of the things about this is exactly what you were saying before, Trish, is that people don't talk about it.
No,
there's still a huge amount of stigma that goes with being an adult without children. There's an awful lot, there's an awful lot of assumptions that are made about adults without children. There's things like, you're not a proper adult because you've not parented. You're not mature because you haven't parented. And you often see when tragedies happen in the news and people will say, as a parent, this hits me very hard, as if because I'm not a parent, I'm likely to be a bit indifferent to it. So there's still an awful lot of stigma, and I think that stigma flows into how we think, or actually how we don't think about people aging without children, how we kind of other people aging without children, because we other people who don't have children generally. And so I think there's a kind of, that's probably a bit more of a esoteric way of looking at it, but I think the more that we talk about the experiences of not having children, the more we make that normal. Because when we were talking last year about messaging and stuff, we were saying, everybody knows people without children. Everybody does. Everybody works with them. They live next door to them. Everybody will know someone without children. So people without children are everywhere. So why is it that we still live in a society where they're not thought about in any particular systemic way?
I think it's what you said, Kirsty, really, that there's this, for some people, there's this shame attached to it, which is ridiculous, really.
I think as a society, we're still very invested in Darwinism, aren't we? Survival of the fittest, sexual selection, and it's your biological imperative reason to be living to have a child. And if you've not done it, what's the point in you existing? Because you've not had that child. You've not fulfilled your body's biological reason for being. And actually, as humans, as a species, I've got a cat trying to chase a frog. Sorry. As a human, as a species, we've evolved socially. We're spiritual. We aren't just biological X's and Y's anymore. We have a sense of self-worth and self-being, and we need to move away from that biological distinction of what it means to be a living creature. That I think one of the things they say about being alive is one thing they've got to be able to do is reproduce. And if you don't reproduce, that automatically discounts you from being a sentient person, if you think about it. And I think we need to move away from that and start accepting people for who they are, and not putting us in these boxes of, you need to achieve this, you need to go to university, you need to finish high school, you need to do this. And we sort of belittle people as worthless, and it's scary. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Kirsty, with some of that. I really do.
For me, this issue that Kirsty's raised, it's very similar to when I've been looking at all older people needing care. It's actually how we value people and the value we attach to them. So I've done bits and pieces in the past with time banks, which were fantastic, because it doesn't matter who you are or what level of mobility or where you were. You always had something that was unique to you and you could give to somebody else, and you were valued for that. I think one of the things that we, with the Aging Without Children, that's bringing a few strands together here. These people who are aging without children have so much to give, and yet because of the poor health and social care outcomes, they're not able to actually contribute fully and give that back to the community. So I think there's two bits there. If we value people properly and it's out in the open, the stigma reduces, and then they have better outcomes, but then they're also able to give more back to the community, which helps, so it spirals itself upwards. I think there is something there about the value that we place on people and the ability to say, yes, you may not have children, but actually you're really brilliant at being secretary of this local group that would fold if it wasn't for you. A silly example, perhaps, but it's just trying to illustrate how we value people and what they do for their communities and how we thank them. And that attacks the stigma issue, but also supports them very strongly as well.
Yeah. I think Adam and Kirsty, you touched on something really, and I think from a young age it is drummed into you, isn't it, that you go to school, you finish, you get married, you have children, you get engaged. But it's like as soon as you're engaged, it's like, when are you getting married? When are you getting married? And you get married, it's like, when are you having children? And actually, if you can remove that stigma, and Jenny Mack, who wrote an amazing book about working in social care, if you want to write another book, you could write one about aging without children, for so that there are people out there, like my brother doesn't have children, they never wanted children, or you could write a book. And I think just educating, we always talk about, I've said it on the show about speaking to the younger generation actually about social care as a career, but actually speaking to children at a younger age about, actually, if you don't want children, that's fine. But I think there is a lot of pressure, and I think we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves. I think I look at some of my friends that don't have children, and they're married. But one of the questions that comes up time and time again, if we're out in a group, it gets on the conversation of children, because like Trish said, it always seems to end up about either food or children. But ones that don't have children, the question is, when are you going to have children? But actually, they might not want children, and they might feel uncomfortable about saying they don't want children because the rest of the group do. But I think, that awareness needs to really be there. But I think I was going to say, just from care providers as well, opening their eyes to, if somebody doesn't have children, about signposting them to your charity, because actually it's probably a conversation that's not ever been had with a lot of people out there.
Yeah, and I think for fear of, enraging Piers Morgan as he's watching this, because I'm sure he does, because he watches all sorts of media.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's it's the fear of engaging in enraging the woke brigade. I think it's something that children at a younger age nowadays, we need to stop imposing social norms full stop on them. When children come home, have you got a girlfriend if they're a boy, or if they got a boyfriend if they're a girl? Is she going to be your wife? Because I know firsthand, and I won't get upset because all of this stuff really does affect me, but I know firsthand, if someone had said to me when I came home, have you got a boyfriend or a girlfriend? I probably wouldn't have gone through the stuff I went through in my early teens, and I probably would have been a lot better and a lot healthier and a lot weller in myself had that been the situation. And I think definitely nowadays we need to stop forcing on people to make them accept these social norms. And if you don't have them, they're not the you're not right. You're not working. Nail on the head there, Mark. And yes, Paul, Kirsty, Trish, write a book. Come on. Let's get a book going. Let's have a social care curriculum of books that can go into schools. I think someone said in the comments earlier, Aging Without Children isn't just about social care; it's about all aspects of life, isn't it? It's not just about being in social care; it's about everything. But I just think it's just something so important. But as providers, what are the questions we should be asking? What are the things we should be looking out for the care providers who are watching this? We're going out to do an assessment. What are the things we need to be aware of when we're setting up these care packages? Because, like Mark said earlier, I've provided support for people before, and they've gone, "Oh yeah, my neighbour's my support, and they do everything for me." And then 6 months later, they move, and then all of a sudden, their next of kin is zero, and they've got a pendant around the neck. They've got a lifeline button that they press if they fall, but they've got no one to put down for it. So it's just the ambulance, it's just the police. So as providers, what are the things we need to be asking, and what are the things we need to be supporting people with?
I suppose
Sorry.
one of the things I know Kirsty's done a lot of the work on this. I suppose one of the things for me is actually the way some of these approaches are made. So, for example, if a social care provider goes in and starts talking to someone, instead of saying, "Well, can your family look after you?" if they were to phrase the question in terms of what are your support networks, it might open up a slightly different conversation. You know, can your family look after you? That person, if they're aging without children, is likely to feel slightly belittled. They may not want to go back and ask for help later on if they think that that's the level of the attitude that they're going to get. So I think for me, it's in no way denying or criticizing or going back against people who do have that support. I think it's basically just being a bit more sensitive to how those questions are asked, because if they're asked in a slightly more sensitive way, as in, what are your support networks? That could be anything. That could be your family, that could be nieces and nephews, that could be whoever down the road who goes and gets you milk. But I think just how some of these attitudes are framed would be a big step forward.
Well, I have to say, the toolkit what I wrote has a whole section on assessment.
The toolkit what I wrote.
The toolkit what I wrote.
Wise.
Yeah, exactly. The toolkit what I wrote has a whole section on assessment. Obviously, you will appreciate that every single thing I wrote in that is now flooded out of my head, and so I can't remember any of it. But what I do say is it just brings to mind something I think that you posted about, Trish, which is that if one thing people could stop doing as care providers is kind of looking so utterly aghast if somebody says, "I don't have anybody."
Well, that happened to me, as you know, the story of the COVID jab.
Yeah, that whole thing of, what, you don't have anyone?
Next to me, nobody, yeah.
Yeah, and then pushing it in a kind of, what, nobody? What, there's nobody? And you're just like, so a lot of it isn't so much about, as Paul says, exactly, it's not about what you're asking, it's how you're asking it, and also then how you're reacting to the responses. Mm. Because a lot of it is not so much the questions people ask. It's like, for people who say to me, "Do you have children?" and I say, "No, I can't have any." And it's always interesting that for some people they go, I'm sorry, and that's fine. But some people get really sort of like, oh, they don't expect me to say that. No. They wanted me to say something different, and their reaction is not my responsibility. So I think for a lot of it is how you react to the answers, just as much as the questions that you ask.
That's a very good point. Mm. And I was thinking about that, and just remembering the times when just a friend or acquaintance they've been blathering on about their family and then sort of referring this conversation to me, and, well, I don't have any family, do I? And there's this sort of stunned, embarrassment. Well, I really don't know what to say now. All you have to say is, "Oh, no, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, move it on." I mean, there's no need to be embarrassed because somebody hasn't got any children, and there's no need to be embarrassed because you haven't got any children. I mean, that's been a conversation sometimes within our group, actually, that people feel embarrassed to say they haven't got any children. I mean, that's pretty awful, isn't it? That's not going to help the cause if they're not going to come out and just say, no, I'm aging without children, I'm coming to join you. But going on what Paul was saying, I think about schools, and probably you, Adam, we've spoken about this in our group about actually maybe talking to schools and having about aging without children and so on. Is that something you maybe think about, Paul and Kirsty? To sort of get it out to schools and producing little talks to practice.
I think at some point it would be very useful. I think would be best done through the local groups rather than us at the national charity level. But as Kirsty's and Adam's hint as well, anything that actually sort of opens it up and gets it out there, it automatically it will reduce the specialness of it. It'll be just, okay, well, that's fine. Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
Fine. That's just normal.
That's it.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying then, Trish, about being involved is, and again, I'm not trying to be self-centric. It's just because I relate to absolutely. It's quite frightening, actually, how much I relate to the same. I'm suddenly having like an existential crisis in my head. I'm going to hang up and go, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? But pandemic.
Well, you can start a group for us in Blackpool.
Do you know what? Honestly, if I have the time, and I'm actually going to consider it anyway, don't worry, I will consider it. And it probably will be virtual. Don't hold me to it, but I'm considering it. But pandemic last year, you're limited to how many families you can link up with, how many people you can have with your household. And to actually be told by your family, but Christmas is just for children, or Christmas is about the children, it's like an absolute gut punch, because it's not. Christmas is about being with those who are near and dear to you. And I think everyone just goes, oh, well, it's about the kids. It's about, yes, it is. It is about the children. But once they've opened their presents, they're probably just sat there going to play with them all day long, eat too much chocolate, throw up and go to bed. Whereas for the adults, what we want to do is eat too much, drink too much, throw up and go to bed. But with the people who mean and matter the most to us. And I think we need to start using. Family is a wonderful word, and it can mean so much to everybody. But I think we need to use something different so that it's inclusive for everyone, those who are important to us, those who matter the most. Because to some people, family isn't blood. Family is the people that they've grown up with all their lives. And I think we need to move away from that family aspect and actually just focus about. I wrote a piece of local guidance for our government around visiting, and we made sure family wasn't in it. We made sure visitors wasn't in it, because they're not visitors, they're not family. They are who are important for that person to live a meaningful life. And as a society, we need to get into that mindset. And if we do have friends who don't have children, don't go, oh, what are you going to do because you've no family for Christmas? It's a case of, what does Christmas mean to you? How are you going to enjoy it the most? And what's important to you about it? Or any holiday, whatever your religion, whatever your background, any holiday, anything that's special to you, enjoy it no matter what. And there's just so much stigma. We need to break it. And I, for one, I'm eternally grateful, Kirsty Paul, that you started this charity and that it's running. And I will back you until I'm, till I'm dead and gone. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's fantastic. And I'm just so happy we've been able to bring it to the viewers of the channel tonight. And I think Mark will completely agree. We're running a little bit over. I don't really mind. Kirsty, Paul, Trish, have you got anything you want to bring up before we go off tonight? Any top tips, anything that you think people need to know about, anything they can go and look up, anything at all?
I think probably, sorry, you go, Trish.
There's only a quick one. Adam just said the word, actually, inclusive, and just that, be inclusive, not exclusive, people.
Yeah. And I would say, it's something that I've said to lots of people on this, is that if you can improve things for people aging without children, then you will improve things for all older people, because people will no longer have to, be reliant on family to prop up an ailing health and social care system. They'll actually be able to have a relationship with their family, which is about going out and having fun, which is what you want to do with your family. So yeah, improve things for people aging without children, improves things for all older people.
And I think that my final thing is just coming on from what Kirsty and Trish said. This isn't about a radical change in the way we do adult social health and social care. This is about just shifting the narrative slightly and reframing some of the approaches. Because as Kirsty says, if it works for AWOC people, it will work for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Adam's on mute.
Adam's on mute.
No, go ahead, Mark. I failed to unmute. I lost that one.
Oh, no. I was just going to say I've had a really good time tonight. And yeah, please do share with us, Kirsty, Paul, any links that you've got that you want us to share out with people, because we'll most definitely do that. And I think if there are any care providers out there, then yeah, please obviously look at the links that Kirsty's got, listen to the advice Paul had about how actually we can rephrase things and speak to people completely differently than actually what we've probably been taught the whole time. I think some of that does come down from social workers, because it's drummed into us about finding out about power of attorney, and automatically power of attorney in our head is drummed in. It's got to be a relative, and actually it probably doesn't always have to be somebody. So yeah, it's just about broadening our mind and being more open and spot on. And I'm going to figure out how to
like physically clone myself so I can start a group up Northwest Way. And start bringing the awareness to everybody up at this end as well. And you know, it's something that I will hand on heart say is not actually fully included in our assessment processes. So I will also be going back to the drawing board on our assessments and really putting stuff in place, and even looking at training for the team about it as well, so that everyone throughout this, you know, throughout our company, the culture adapts to understand that actually this is something we need to work on. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. I could sit here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed
Most
it.
welcome. And I will be in touch because I will be setting up a local group. So yeah, you've not got rid of me.
Gotcha.
Next week, Mark. What have we got?
Next week, gosh. Do you know what? This question throws me every week. Next week, we've got shared decision making, I believe.
Oh, yes. Shared decision making with my home life. Probably actually leads on really well from this week. And it's all about involving people in the decisions that making. And again, people, I did a piece of work with my home life, and they will be the people I worked with on this little piece of work. Dog barking. It's like, I'm like Dr. Doolittle, got cats and frogs and dogs. But I did a piece of work with them, and it was all about who is involved in this shared decision making, who is involved in the decisions around care. And again, in that, we try to remove as much about it being just family and about people being important to them. So really can't wait for next week to be discussing this. It will be very similar to our co-production week, but more focused on a singular piece of work. So we look forward to seeing you then. But for now, it's a bye from me, and I presume a bye from everyone else. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you again for joining us tonight on The Caring View. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and whilst you're here, check out some of the other videos that we've got up online. If you've got something that you think may be interesting for us to discuss, or if you want to guest spot with us, then drop us an email to thecaringview@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter, find us on Facebook. All the information is down there in the description box. But until then, have a good evening, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.